Okay, why don't we continue? Just before we engage in our private guided reflection, I would like to answer two questions that have come up, and they do have bearing on the private guided reflection. One question is, can I forgive God? In other words, when unjust things happen to me, God, being all-powerful and all-knowing, could have prevented it. And so, can I forgive God? And I want to mention that just in case some of you were going to engage in that process of forgiving God here. I would urge you not to do that. Right? And let me tell you why, because it would seem obvious if you have anger with God, it would be reasonable to forgive. I would say no, because the only people, and God is, Father, Son, Holy Spirit are persons, the only ones you forgive are persons who have been unjust to you. Since God is sinless, holy, and perfect, he cannot be unjust to you. And so even though we might be very disappointed that our life is turning out in a certain way, I would urge you, instead of forgiving God, because I think that brings you down a path that isn't truthful, and I would prefer to stay with truth, goodness, and beauty about forgiveness, as opposed to, well, if it helps you do it. Because I've heard people who write on forgiveness say that, saying God is bigger than you are, and if you need to forgive God, go ahead and do that. But you're not really standing in the truth, because God cannot be unjust to you. There are unjust situations in the world, I understand, and I know God could take us out of those, but there is a reason why we're in them, part of which is to grow as persons. So the suffering we endure, once we get to our heavenly reward, we will see they were for our benefit despite the difficulty. So the question then, to follow the first question, can I forgive God, would be, well, what do I do if I'm fuming with God? And here's what I would recommend. And Kevin and I have had a discussion about this ourselves prior to this time together here today. What I recommend when someone is angry with God is to work on, and it's hard to do, to work on the theme of what I would call acceptance. In other words, this is happening to you, or it did happen to you, and God is allowing it. And to accept God's will is also a struggle. But we're then not engaging in the theme of presuming that God is unjust, and therefore I can stand in mercy toward a person who was unjust to me. And people disagree on this, obviously, but the reason I come down on the side of not doing it and giving you the option of doing something, which is acceptance, is this theme of being truthful. So for good or ill, that's the way I'm looking at it. And then another one I want to bring up, again, in case someone was thinking of doing this. Someone asked me about whether a child who was very fearful of a powerful storm, whether it's a tornado or a hurricane, could forgive the tornado or the hurricane, with the idea being, if they can have compassion on the hurricane and understanding and gentleness toward the hurricane or the tornado, their bound-up emotions will lessen and they will become more relaxed and they will be healthier. And again, while that may be the case, I would urge a no to that one, because a hurricane or a tornado is not a person. A hurricane or a tornado is not capable of being unjust to you. And it would be the same kind of theme of acceptance of what has happened, and maybe some forgiveness of people who might have been insensitive and say, grow up, get over it. That would require forgiveness, rather than letting the child mourn and be fearful for a while, which is part of the healing process. So when we engage in this exercise today, I would encourage you to focus on a person. It could be people if a whole group ended up hurting you. I work with students on campus who talk to me. I work with first-generation students in college, the Center for Educational Opportunity, and most are coming from challenging backgrounds, and some of them want to forgive the society for, let's say, ethnic bias or racism. And I think that's fine. It's just more vague, but you're forgiving people, and you can forgive particular people there who've been unfair to you, but you can also forgive a society that perpetuates a norm that is harmful to the person. So you're connecting with a person. You could also forgive a company. If you're having trouble in a company, and again, they have norms that foster insensitivity and the like. But again, I would suggest thinking about a person or two or three who have specifically been unfair to you in that company, and start there before you do the larger theme of the company. So with that in mind, now you might be changing who you're going to be forgiving based on that. I'd like you to think about a person, or it could be a mom and a dad, or it could be a family group, or it could be a work group, but I want persons to be in this for you. Think of one person or one group who has been particularly unfair to you, and you're not over it yet. Now, again, let me make one more qualifier before we get into this. If you're new at the forgiveness path, you need not choose the person who has slammed you to the mat the hardest in life, because that's starting at the top, and that's really difficult. So if you have someone who has absolutely crushed you, you might not want to start there unless you're ready for it. And if you're ready for it, let's do that. But you might want to, shall we say, dial it down a little bit and pick someone who has hurt you, but the feelings aren't overwhelming. They're not massive. Because those kind of massive feelings, if it's rage, are better done after you've been, shall we say, in the minor leagues for a while, rather than be going right into the major leagues. So think of someone who has hurt you, and unless you're really, really ready for it, not someone who is still flattening you emotionally, so that you get a sense of this, that you walk this path with me. And the more you walk the path, the more of an expert you're going to become at it. Aristotle tells us that you grow in any virtue by practice, practice, practice. In other words, we nurture it in our hearts and in our minds and in our behavior. And so that's the spirit of this afternoon, to begin the practice of forgiveness. For some of you for the first time, for some of you for the 10th time, for some of you for the 100th time. But the goal is the 10,000th time. That's where we're heading. That 16-year-old soccer player who's going to be in World Cup has to start somewhere. And we're not going to start that student athlete in the middle of the World Cup and say, go for it, because it would be overwhelming. They're not ready for that. But they are going to have to kick that ball and deal with that ball over and over and over again. And that's what I'm asking of you, to have the strong will and the determination to try this today, and then to cling to this and not let it go. To practice forgiveness as often as you must, and to go through the process. If you have to daily, that's fine, or weekly, or whenever the feelings kind of wash back on you. And the feelings will wash back on you if you're like most of us. In other words, once you go through the forgiving process with a person, you're going to wake up sometime and the memories will come back, or you've had a dream about the person, or you meet them, or someone talks about them and feelings will come back. Do not be discouraged about that, because you've heard it here today that it is a natural thing. It happens. But as you practice and practice and practice forgiveness, you will probably be able to go through the process more quickly and more deeply the next time, and the next time after that. So be ready to have unfinished business. But here's the beauty of having unfinished business with good work on forgiveness. The anger or the other emotions you have that may be dominating you today won't dominate you. One of the incest survivors said to us, "My anger used to control me. Now I'm in control of the anger. And it hasn't gone away completely, but it's manageable." For some of you, the anger or the mourning or the frustration or whatever the emotion is will go away completely, and then it could return. For others of you, it will simply go to manageable levels, and that's okay, because the healing is taking place and you are growing as a person. So keep all of this in mind and be gentle with yourself. This exercise is meant not to make the smoke come out of your ears, but instead to find a gentle place in your heart where you feel comfortable going, and it becomes familiar to you, and it is a way to self-preserve, to self-persevere. And it will become a familiar friend, this thing called forgiveness, which is a process. And as it becomes a friend, you will derive a certain comfort and confidence from it. But we have to start somewhere. So just as we say to that 16-year-old, let's go out onto the field now. Let's go out onto the forgiveness field. And we're doing this all together, but privately. You're not doing it alone. You're doing it in community today, with me and with a lot of other people. You're doing it by the grace of God. So I would like you to take just a moment, and for those of you who are believers, and I've been told most of you are, I would like you to pray for the guidance to do this gently and well. Let's take 1 minute before you hear my voice again. Okay. Now that you have your best friend with you along the way, I'm going to be just posing some descriptions and some questions for you as you walk this path. Some of these, what we call guideposts, won't be for you, but they might be for others. So be patient with me, please, if I come to a guidepost and it's not relevant for you, because not all of these 20 guideposts are relevant for all people with all situations. And even if it might not be relevant for you on this particular issue with this particular person, it might be for the next one. First question, who is the person who hurt you? In other words, name the person in your own mind. Mom, dad, brother, husband, wife, friend, uncle, the kid sitting next to me in English 23 years ago in high school, whoever it happens to be. How deeply were you hurt? If you blow out your knee and go in for the surgery and the rehab, a lot of times the sports medicine people have a chart on the wall from 1 to 10, and they have smiley faces from happy to really, really sad because it's excruciating pain. On that 1 to 10 scale, how deeply were you hurt at the time? 10 meaning excruciating hurt, and 1 being hardly anything at all. Okay, now the same question brought forward to time right now. How deeply are you feeling hurt right now? Again, 1 is just a little bit. 5 is, it's a burden. 8 is it's an extreme burden. 9 is it's outrageous. And 10 is I can hardly stand it. Give me a number for now. And compare it to where it was then, because then you can see where you are relative to when it happened. And do me a favor and remember the number for now. Because at the end, we're going to have a post-test. I'm going to ask you again what your number is. So give me a number now about how much hurt you're feeling. And just remember it. Okay, next question. This person might have hurt you 100 times. Remember one of the questions in the morning? What happens if we have an ongoing series of hurts? If you have an ongoing series of hurts, try to pick out one or a few that you can tackle as a unit. Because it's much better, I think, to forgive one person for something specific as opposed to saying, I'm going to forgive my father for the 4,721 times he ignored me. That's too much. Let's pick out one time, or maybe a week, or a pattern that is manageable for you. And think about that particular incident or set of incidences. And now try to remember the circumstances, because I want you to remember this so that you know you're forgiving a real person for real issues. What were the circumstances like at the time of this issue? What was said or not said that should have been? Was it a morning? Was it an afternoon? Winter, summer? Anyone else around, or were you pretty much isolated with this person, or maybe it was a phone call? And if you had to label what the injustice is, what is it? Is it an insensitive remark? Is it a neglect? Is it overwhelming anger where you felt demeaned? Or an ignoring where you felt demeaned through silence? What is it? The one thing we all share, regardless of what the incident is this. We had love taken from us. Okay, each one of us had love taken from us, and that wasn't fair. We deserved to have that love preserved, and it wasn't. It was taken from us. So every one of us in this room shares that one constant. I want you to see that we share a common bond in our wounds. Somebody took love away from us, and that's not the way we were built to live. That's not the way we were designed to live. And that's why it hurts. And that's why we can write down a number of how hurt we felt then and how hurt we're feeling now. And let's just be honest about it. Someone took love away from us. And then finally, how did you respond then when the love was taken away? Did you get annoyed? Did you yell? Did you walk away? Did you say something you regret? How did you respond to the love taken away from you? And be gentle with yourself. Love was taken away from you. Probably shocked you. Surely hurt you. So now let's go to the uncovering phase. Remember we talked about all these layers of pain that happen after the incident? We're going to explore that so you get to see just how many layers of pain you have, so you know how much work you're going to have to do. And this is done simply to show you the depth of your pain so that we can cleanse the wound. Because if you think the only pain you have is the withdrawal of the love, then you might not work on the other issues. So that's the point. And keep in mind that we have the surgeon standing by to do heart surgery on you. And that surgeon is Dr. Forgiveness itself, the virtue of forgiveness. So it's not that we're going to expose your pain and you're going to be left helpless. We have forgiveness right there to heal your heart. So let's go together into this uncovering phase, knowing that we're going to uncover some pain, but there is an answer. And I say that because some people are afraid of their pain. And they're afraid of their pain because they think there's no answer. I hope I'm a very good friend to a homeless person right now. And she is very afraid of her pain. And she drowns her pain in drugs and drink. And that's not healthy. That's simply compounding her pain. And that's why I don't want you to be afraid of it. She's deathly afraid of her pain. And I hope it doesn't destroy her. Okay, the uncovering of your anger. First, have you avoided dealing with the actual amount of pain that you have? Sometimes, as I said in the morning, our pride kicks in and we say the person couldn't possibly have hurt us that much. As we kind of condemn them, I'm going to ask you to try and fight against that tendency as I ask the question. Again, how much were you really hurt by this person when you include humility in the equation? Does the number deepen closer to 10 when you humbly think of the amount of love withdrawn from you, and now you think about how much pain you had and are having now? A lot of times the number goes up when you take the virtue of humility into it. Okay. And again, denying the hurt is another layer of pain. And here's another question, again in the uncovering phase. How angry or mournful or sad or disappointed are you? Or hate-filled? Don't be afraid of the word. Don't be afraid of the emotion. If you feel hate toward the person, it's better to know it, because there's a way out of that. You don't have to be afraid of your hatred. Forgiveness can protect you from that. How blank, angry, mournful, sad, hate-filled, resentful, frustrated are you on a 1 to 10 scale? Label the emotion. 1 is a tiny bit, 10 is I can't stand it. Okay, next question. Were you shamed by what happened? Did someone walk out on you and now people know they're not with you and talk about it? Or was there abuse of some kind and people talk about it? Was there ridicule and others witnessed it? Where you're now diminished as a person, not really, but you might think so, because of other scrutiny? Shame is the light shining on you when you don't deserve it and don't want it, but it's there and you can't escape it. Have you felt shame? And if so, on a 1 to 10 scale, where would you put the shame? 1 is a little bit, 5 is quite a bit, and 10 is a huge amount of shame. And I want you to put a number on it because I want you to see the degree of added pain you have in your life. Because of something you didn't deserve, you didn't want, you didn't ask for, but love was withdrawn from you. Okay, so far we've gone through 4 layers of pain. The injustice itself, standing against humility and saying they couldn't hurt me, having a lot of anger or whatever, shame, and here's a 5th one. Has the anger affected your health in any way? Let me go through some of the ways. When some people are distracted by the inner wounds, they don't eat on time. And when they don't eat on time, they just grab what they can, and the nutrition isn't sufficient. When we deal with a lot of wounds, we sometimes fail to get the necessary exercise we need. I'll do that tomorrow. I'm tired. Cut it out. When we're dealing with unresolved wounds, which is love withdrawn from us, our sleep pattern is disrupted. We fall asleep late and wake up early, or wake up quite a bit during the night, or sometimes toss and turn with even a vague sense that something's wrong, not even necessarily this person and the event. Sometimes we're lonely, and so we don't fall into good work patterns, or we're in such pain we can't concentrate. Has any of this been part of your health pattern? None of it is fair. If I could take it away from you, I would. But I hear the scriptures calling me and say, Bob, don't do that, because this is the way each one of these dear people is going to grow. Let them grow. Don't take the pain away. Okay, I won't take the pain away. That's why I'm not God. I'd probably take it away from you. But is it there? Is your health compromised to some degree? And if so, that's not fair. It's another layer of pain. Here's a 6th layer of pain. Is the person living in your mind? Remember my friend who dreamt about his father every day for over a decade? Sometimes the person is living in your mind, and sometimes it's great if certain people are living in our minds, right? Those who give love and we exchange love, that's a vitality for us. But I'm talking about the person living in your mind where you are dwelling on the love withdrawn, on the injury, on the unfairness. And that's the particular aspect of the person who is living in your mind. Do you sometimes daydream about the person where you're watching television and you're kind of missing part of whatever you're watching because the person pops into your mind? And sometimes we're driving and we miss a few blocks and don't know how that happened because we're thinking about something else, even though we're paying attention on the road. Is that person on your mind? That's kind of unpleasant if you think about it. Because the person could be in your mind in a positive way, but if they're living in your mind in this negative way. That's another layer of pain. And I would like that to stop for you. And forgiveness can help with that, actually. Where they still might be in your mind, but in a new way, rather than in this way of withdrawing love from you. Here's a seventh layer of pain. Has this injustice, this withdrawal of love from you, caused a change in your life that you didn't want to make? Less income? Moving? A little more disorganization? Anything at all? Has there been a change that you have not wanted to make, that wasn't necessarily reasonable, but you have had to make it? And if so, let's just say yes to it, because it has happened, and realize that that's another layer of pain. And see, each time we add a layer of pain, we can actually cycle back and ask a deeper question, for example, about your health. You see, the disrupted eating pattern or the disrupted exercise pattern might not be just because of the love taken away, but a lot of these other complications ganging up on you. You see, a sleep pattern might be disrupted not just because of the original event that is now over, but all these layers of pain that are very active and alive inside you. And we have to be aware of it. Let's stand in the virtue of courage, knowing that it happened. And let's stand in the more supernatural virtue of faith, knowing that we can have a way out, that God has provided a way out. And then our final one is, has this event and all the pains that you have experienced caused a change in your worldview or how you view the world? Have you become a little bit more pessimistic about God? Has your image of the divine changed as a result of the injustice we're talking about and all the resultant layers of pain? When I talk to some, I can't generalize to all, but when I talk to some people who are really, really, really angry with God, they're actually really, really angry with other people who've withdrawn love from them. And they want it right, and so they end up fuming at God, and that's a changed worldview. And so I want to ask the hard question here. Has your view of God altered a little bit? I mean, here's a question worth taking seriously. Do you think God is a little bit more distant than you used to? A little more passive in life than you used to think? Do you think, now turning to the idea of other people, think about people who have not even hurt you. Think about people you know who haven't even hurt you, and I have this question. Do you think they're mostly out for themselves? Or are most people also basically good and trying to be good to others? Are most people, for the most part, looking out for number one, and you can't expect much from them, and so your expectations are rather low? And if so, has that been a shift since you've been hurt? Sad to say, I see this happening characteristically across the board with people who've been hurt deeply. A lot of times their faith can weaken, and they look for every excuse in the book to keep it weakened. They can go so far as to rebel, and get into all kinds of rebellious behavior, or they can just become subtly negative about the world, subtly pessimistic. Do you see how that robs you of your joy and you're not even aware of it? We can drift into that, kind of like being on a little rowboat that's been tied to the shore, and all of a sudden the tether is gone and we're just kind of drifting until one day we wake up and we realize we have drifted from the shore. How's your prayer life been? One thing I find with people who are suffering, they find it harder to pray. They find it harder to get close to God at a time when they need to get closer to God. So let me ask you with regard to your worldview, how's your prayer life been? If it hasn't been great, I would like to put forward the possibility that it's not just because you've just simply neglected it, but that your wounds are keeping you from God. And we talked about 9 wounds here with one person. Now think about all of this with all the wounds you face in your life from that one person and every other person. Let's just very quickly do the math. Right? Let us say, I'm going to make up some concrete numbers here to give you some idea of how your prayer life may be weakened, your anger with God can increase, and you can become more pessimistic as you're weighed down by pain. We're going through one person and one event, and we've uncovered the possibility of 9 wounds for you. Now let's say this person has wounded you 50 times. Right? Now we have 450 wounds. And now let's say we have 9 other people who have hurt us 50 times each. We now have 4,500 wounds. 4,500 possible wounds that you're carrying around inside your heart. That has to affect a person. Right? It absolutely has to affect a person. And so we see some of this coming out with excessive drug use or drink or just nastiness in the home. Or people writing books telling us that those who think God exists are infantile, and they get on bestseller lists. It amazes me. Right? Just think of all the wounds you're carrying around. And now I want you to take a moment and just think about everybody here, including me, and all of the wounds each of your fellow human beings are carrying around with them right now. In this auditorium today, there are thousands of wounds captured in our heart. Thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And here's my worry. What are we going to do with all the wounds? What are we going to do with all of this? I'll tell you what we're going to do with them if we don't work on forgiveness. The wounds are going to have to come out somehow. And you know who they're going to come out on? Anyone in your life will take them. All right? It might be a fellow employee, a friend, a spouse. It could be your very children. And unfortunately, wounded people wound other people. You have been wounded by someone who is wounded. You are now wounded and I am wounded, and everybody in here has so many wounds that if we could do the math on it all, it would overwhelm us. And we're just a small little group. And if we don't work on these wounds, we're going to go out of here with our wounds, And someone's going to get it. Someone's going to get it. You cannot tell me that boy in Ohio this week who killed 3 and wounded 2 others wasn't profoundly wounded by others with love taken away from him. I'm 100% certain that's true. And we're not all going to end up doing anything like that, don't get me wrong. But he didn't channel his wounds right. And even if your and my wounds aren't nearly as bad as his, you and I are at risk for throwing our wounds onto other people and withdrawing love from them because we've been wounded. And on it goes. We work in Belfast, Northern Ireland, where wounds have been passed down the generations for at least 400 years. Think about that. Right? Let's start 400 years ago and march year by year and generation by generation until a husband and wife meet in holy matrimony in the year 2012. Do you think in Northern Ireland and Belfast, each one is bringing some wounds into that marriage relationship? What are the odds that each is going to wound the other? Very, 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 very high. Right? It's very, 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 very high, especially if they're not aware of it, especially if they're carrying their wounds in a society that doesn't encourage them to get rid of their wounds through forgiveness. Will that marriage be as healthy as it could be if they truly confronted what happened to them before, both of them, and they understand what happened to each other, and now they come together and understand what each one's woundedness is, and they can help each other with their wounds and then help each other avoid wounding one another? Can you understand why marriage is precarious these days? It's because we don't deal with all of these wounds. And we inflict it on our spouse, the spouse inflicts it on us, and now we're inflicting things from our past and from generations past that we, with great-great-great-grandparents we've never met. And we have these wounds and we're confused. And the only thing we know is when we think about the wounds, we have them, but we have to find a way to get rid of the wounds. We have to find a way to stop it. And that's what I'm asking you today as we move into phase 2, is to stop the woundedness. Keep it at your door and don't give it away to another person. Because you have at least 9 areas of woundedness with one person. And we've already added it up. It could be 4,500 such wounds in you. And I'd like you, if you wouldn't mind, to understand that if you have these kind of wounds, you haven't found the right solution to the wounds. And so we have to do something other than what you've been doing if you're still carrying the wounds with you. And so I'd like you to see if you could make a commitment to the forgiveness process today and tomorrow and for the rest of your life. This is a commitment I'm asking of you. And it's not like the commitment where I'm saying, let's get physically fit and we try it all together for a month, and then when we get sore, we say to heck with it. I'm asking for a commitment that becomes part of who you are as a person. And what would that commitment look like? We're talking about deciding to forgive. What I'm asking of you, and please take this seriously, is to know you have the opportunity, when you've been treated unjustly, to struggle to get rid of resentment and offer goodness as a way of life. Not just toward a person who's hurt you for a particular incident, but I'm asking you to make a shift today in your way of life. so that this is the way you approach life. Here's what I mean more specifically. I'm going right back to the scriptures that we talked about this morning. I want you to consider making this commitment. I will love despite others' withdrawal of love from me. I will love that person even though they won't reciprocate necessarily. I will not withdraw love from this person, even though they have and might be continuing to withdraw love from me. I want you to make this commitment. I am going to show myself, that's you talking now, I'm going to show myself that my love is stronger than any injustice thrown against me. I will not buckle under the injustice. I will not retaliate because of the injustice. My love will be stronger than that, where I can stand in love despite any love withdrawn from me now for the rest of my life. Not that you won't fall, but the fall isn't a deliberate attempt to do that. It's just that we're imperfect, so that when you fall, you will get back up again. Are you willing to say with me, and I'm going to say it too, okay, that I will do no harm to anyone who's harmed me for the rest of my life? I will do no harm, and I will love even though I am not loved back. That's what I'm asking of you, simply a commitment to that that is the way you will live your life for the rest of your days. I will do no harm to those who do me harm, and I will love those who deliberately withdraw love from me. It's a tough assignment, but if you stay at it, I think you will find that you will be living your life with great meaning and purpose. That's the commitment. I will do no harm to those who harm me. I will love those who have withdrawn love from me. And I will not give up. I will not back down. That's the virtue of forgiveness. The virtue of forgiveness requires a strong will, the grace of God, and a perseverance that you didn't know you had. That's what it's going to take. Look at the alternative. If you don't do this, our little group, when we get out of here, will unleash thousands of different kind of wounds that we just went over to some people in this world. We're going to wound because we have been wounded. Or we can decide to check our wounds at our own door, to do no harm, and to love even those who've withdrawn love from me. And then you are no longer contributing wounds in the world, you are contributing healing to the world. Which way do you want to live? Which way do you want to go? I have brought you to a crossroads. And unfortunately, society has a default option. You know what the default option in society is? Let's keep the wounds a-coming. Okay? And we'll deal with them as best we can. We'll deal with them as best we can because we're going to keep the wounds a-coming. You know why? Because we're not aware of them and we don't discuss them. And if they're there and we don't acknowledge them, if we don't start rehabbing, you're just going to pass the wounds along whether you know it or not. So you are at a crossroads. And if you decide not to follow the challenge, society will not arrest you. Society will not condemn you. But you will be leaving a legacy that you don't want to leave. Forgiveness, ladies and gentlemen, is about legacy. It's about what you will be leaving in this world when you die. Will you be leaving more wounds or more love? And I think it's as simple as that. What will your legacy be? I hope your legacy will be more love and not more wounds, because there's kind of enough wounds in the world already, right? Let us not add more. Let's make the commitment to stop the wounds we have at our door so we leave a legacy of love from now on. That's your challenge, to leave a legacy of love. Okay, that's our decision phase. Now let's go on to the work phase. Let us work toward understanding who this person is who hurt you. I have some questions for you. Is this person evil incarnate or a wounded person? Is this person evil incarnate, to be dismissed, not tolerated, shoving them under the rug if we could? Or are they someone who has been wounded by others and brought their wounds to you? I think what's happening is the person who was insensitive to you, who shamed you, who's making you tired, is a wounded person who inherited wounds from others because the person who gave them the wounds didn't know what to do with their wounds. So they wounded that person, now they wounded you, and now you're at risk for passing your wounds on to others still. If it's true that this is a wounded person who has wounded you, I want you to see it, but I don't want you to excuse what they did. What they did was wrong, it is wrong, and it will always be wrong. And there's no excusing it. There's no forgetting what they did, but I don't want you to remember by seeing someone who's evil incarnate. When you remember, see a person who's confused and wounded, who inherited wounds and had no clue what to do with those wounds because no one ever took the time to work with them. I want you to see someone who might have trouble reconciling, who might have trouble with knowing what justice is. But I want you to see a wounded person who shouldn't have done what they did. I want you to see the wounds from their childhood. I want you to see the wounds that they were bearing when they wounded you, the special circumstances of their frustration, their disappointment, their sadness, their anger, whatever was going on, that they tossed onto you, but I don't want you to excuse it. I want you to say what they did to me in withdrawing love was wrong, is wrong, and will always be wrong. But I want you to see a wounded person who did this to you, both in the past, their distant past, and what they have done to you recently. Another question about who this person is. Genesis 1, made in the image and likeness of God. Did you know that's repeated in Genesis 1? That we're made in the image and likeness of God? That's another homework assignment for you. Read Genesis 1 and see that that theme is repeated. It's mentioned twice. Just like Jesus' command to love one another in the upper room discourse. We are made in the image and likeness of God. So my question for you is, think of this wounded person who withdrew love from you, and my question is has this person been made in the image and likeness of God? The answer is yes. This is a person who's been made in the image and likeness of God. You share personhood in that sense with this person. You share a common personhood. And I don't mean just the way the blood flows through the veins and your need for sleep and nutrition. I'm talking about the divine spark in the soul. This person is made in the image and likeness of God. Next question, still on the idea of working toward understanding. Did Jesus Christ die for this person on the cross? Romans 5:8. While this person was yet a sinner, did Christ die for this person? Did Jesus Christ die on the cross for this person before he or she was born? If this person were the only person in the world, would Jesus have died for this person? Two images for you. I want you to think in an image way in these next two questions. Can you picture yourself at the foot of the cross of Calvary with Jesus' blood dripping on you for your sake? And now bring the person who has hurt you into the image where they are at the foot of the cross with you, and Jesus' blood is dripping on both of you. You share the crucifixion mercy with the person who's hurt you. Here's the second image. Rather than now you being at the foot of the cross, I want you to think as Paul did in Colossians 1:24, and in love with Jesus, put yourself on the cross with Jesus, joining him in love. Because that's where he wants you to be. He wants you to complete the affliction. I want you to join in love with Jesus on the cross, and now look down on the person where that love that you are sharing with Jesus can aid that person. You and Jesus together, suffering for the one who hurt you. Now focus on the area of your heart, the Greek center of emotion. And I want to go through those two images again, and I want you to see what your heart is like. I want you to see if your heart is getting a little softer toward the person who hurt you. The person who hurt you and you are at the foot of the cross, with Jesus' blood dripping on both of you. He's having mercy on you both, because you have both wounded people. You have both wounded people. It's just different who you have wounded. And now I want you to focus on the area of your heart when you unite with Jesus on his cross, completing the love that he has asked you for. Love requires completion, requires unity. Unite with Jesus on the cross, complete what is lacking in the affliction, and look down on the one who has hurt you. What's your heart like? That, ladies and gentlemen, is compassion. Any little bit of softness for that person is compassion. And I want you to try and nurture that from a tiny little mustard seed compassion to the bush where the birds of the air can rest. And it's going to take time for the mustard seed to grow that way. But if you hold those two images and focus on your heart, any softness at all is the beginning of growing in compassion, and don't let it go. Hold tight to that and then give it away to the one who has hurt you. Hold tight to the compassion so you don't lose it, and give it to that person. Maybe it's feeding a dying father in the hospital as the incest survivor did, or having a tasteful religious ceremony to give a good name back to the family. Maybe it's a return phone call that you haven't made in years, or a birthday card, or a smile, or praying for the person, or inviting them to church, or making some kind of contact with the person. I don't know. It all depends on your circumstance. But let that softened heart become a little softer every day. And when you see the person and what they did to you, change the image. Don't focus so much on what happened last week or 10 years ago or 30 years ago and what they did to you as we began this little meditation, but see them at the foot of the cross with you, both wounded and in need of Christ's cross work and resurrection, and you then unite with Jesus Christ on that cross and look down on the person. That's how I want you to see the person from now on. We don't forget, we remember in new ways. That's the new remembering. And then we ask you in the work phase to accept the pain. Accept the pain. Here's what I mean by that. Don't try to get rid of the pain, because in all likelihood, if you try to get rid of the pain, you're going to throw it onto another person, either the one who hurt you or the defenseless among us, those who will take it in your circle of friends or family. I'm asking you to bear the pain. It's biblical. Jesus asks us to take up our cross every day and follow in his steps. He doesn't say cast off the cross and follow in my steps. He says take up your cross and follow in my steps. That's pain bearing. The image that I gave you where you are on the cross with Christ looking down in love, uniting in love with Jesus first, get in touch with that divine love, that healing love, that sustaining love with Jesus first. And then as you look down on the person, realize you are bearing the pain of the cross for him or her. You are bearing the cross so that you are able to love the person even a little bit. That's what I mean by bearing the pain, accepting the pain. And you know what the ultimate gift is of that? You will not be passing your pain on to that person or others. Your bearing the pain for this person is a gift to many, 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 many people. Because now you can be a conduit of good. You can begin forming today your legacy of love rather than your legacy of woundedness. And we all know people who have died and left a ton of wounds on this world, don't we? Don't we know a lot of people whose legacy, without their even meaning to, has been to leave a lot of wounds for everybody else to clean up? Right? It's time for you not to do that. And with the kind of questions I'm asking here and the kind of images I'm giving in your mind, and I hope they're powerful enough for you to remember, this is giving you the opportunity to begin cultivating a legacy of love. And it's going to start because you have suffered. It's going to start because you have been wounded. You now have the opportunity to leave a legacy of love. If you think about it, without this suffering, you might not be here today. This suffering is giving you an opportunity to give a gift to this person and to give a gift to the next generation, to give a gift to the family, to co-workers, to your community. That's what I mean by gift giving. You are now giving of your love that is stronger than any injustice that can come up against you, where you can stand in that love and give it away despite the pain. You can give away the love with the pain on your back as a cross. You can give away love when you are crucified with Christ for the other. That is a gift. You can give the person a gift of a smile or a card of some kind or a box of chocolates, but the chocolates once eaten are gone and the person's gained a few pounds anyway. So giving them a gift beyond the tangible of your love is an eternal gift. And so I want you to be a gift giver. I want you to be a gift giver specifically of giving your love away through the pain, in the pain, with Jesus Christ for the other. Give your love through the pain. And that way pain will never defeat you, you see. Pain and suffering will always be an opportunity to love more deeply. which now brings us to the discovery phase, finding meaning in suffering. I think the greatest meaning we can find from our suffering, quite frankly, is this. I am a person who can love in my pain. I have found that meaning. I am someone who is strong enough who can love in my pain and give that love to those who the world will tell me don't deserve it. That gives meaning to life, not just to the situation. This kind of meaning that you can give love in your pain and through your pain to the one who the world says doesn't deserve your pain can help you to be a thriver in this world. This is why the incest survivors went from severely depressed to non-depressed, you see. They found a new meaning in their life that they didn't think is possible, which was to love through their pain, and they did. To feed your dying father in the hospital after what he did to her is a remarkable expression of love, is a remarkable expression of strength. She found meaning in her life. We also find, when we start forgiving in this way, the connectedness of forgiveness with us all. We all share woundedness. We all share a legacy, for good or ill, whatever that will be. We all share the opportunity to leave a legacy of love. And therefore, we are all connected in our forgiving and in our woundedness, but we're also connected to God and his forgiving of us. And so it's all connected, you see. We are connected to the persons of the Trinity through that mercy. We now can have mercy on the one who hurt us, and that mercy can extend to others who would have been the recipients of our wounds. Now they'll be the recipients of our love. We see connectedness. We see community, you see, as we begin thinking about this a little bit more deeply. We know we're not alone, because when you're on the cross with Christ, you're clearly not alone. You're being intimate. You are engaging in intimacy when you're on the cross with Christ, because he has left something open for you. You know why, I think? To make your suffering more meaningful, to make your suffering dignified. Suffering no longer has the same meaning society gives to it when you suffer with Christ on his cross. Suffering is not something to be avoided and to be shunned and to fear. It's not a degradation of us. It doesn't bring us down and make us have low self-esteem. If anything, suffering is exalted to a higher level where I am able to grow in holiness because I am getting to know Jesus Christ better and having the opportunity to give love where society would say you're insane for doing so. Okay? And so here you have a new purpose in life, even. What is your purpose in life? Pop quiz. What's your purpose in life? To leave a legacy of love, to draw closer to Jesus Christ, and to leave a legacy of love. However you can work that out. But your suffering has given you an opportunity to have an entirely new purpose in life, to leave love as your legacy. And you know, that's as rare as finding a perfectly cut diamond, because we're not encouraged to do it. Okay? But that's your new purpose, whether you like it or not. Okay? I hope you like it, because that's your new purpose in life. Because once you embrace the cross, once you embrace the love of Jesus in this way, once you embrace doing no harm, once you embrace leaving love, now you have a new purpose of giving the love away, of leaving a legacy of love, rather than the nonsense of woundedness that's just going to that could go on for generations. Unfortunately, the legacy you have of love will not continue unless the next generation understands this too. Because the chain of love can be broken in even one generation in a family if love is withdrawn. And they might have to find their way back to it. That's why we have to find a way to educate about this. Your legacy has to be kept alive by the next generation being introduced to the same thing. And finally, we have here what's called the discovery of the freedom of forgiveness. The freedom is that you're no longer bound by suffering. You're no longer brought low in a long-term sense through the suffering. You no longer have to fear suffering. You no longer have to fear what's around the corner, because you know you are equipped with a new purpose in life, which is to leave a legacy of love, finding meaning that wounds will never defeat you, and that your love is stronger than any injustice that's being put up against you. Right? And now we're talking about what we've come full circle with this morning, where we are talking about joy and rejoicing as we move through woundedness in a particular way. You can be free even if you're carrying a cross on your back. You can be free even if you can't move because there are nails on your hands being nailed to a big plank. Right? There is indeed freedom there, and it's the freedom of knowing you won't be defeated and knowing you can love and that you are giving that love away to others. And I'm hoping you will want to do that. It is just a beginning, ladies and gentlemen. It's just a planting of the mustard seed in the ground. It is not the end, it's only the beginning. And now it's up to you. What kind of a legacy do you want to leave in this world? That's the question. Right? That's the ultimate homework assignment of the guided private reflection. What is the legacy you want to leave in this world? And you can begin that right now, right this minute now. And you can begin an entirely new legacy that you might not have ever considered. I'm sorry I brought you to a crossroads. I'm not sorry I brought you to it. Okay? I'm glad I brought you to a crossroads. And the crossroads itself has a certain kind of suffering to it, because now you must choose. And I think we know that there really is no choice in the matter. I think we know what we have to choose, which is to be with Jesus Christ and love even with a cross on our back that someone else has given to us that we didn't deserve, and even though we have 4,500 wounds within us. Let us not have questions now.